Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. We're very excited to get started, and I hope that everyone can hear me without any issues. If you have any technical issues of any kind, please drop something in the chat and someone from our team will address those for you. Tonight, we're going to shift the focus and do something a little different than what we usually do with our webinar series. This time, we're taking focus away from our education programs that we normally run, and we're going to highlight real life experiences and lived experiences for people living with asthma. So you'll hear powerful accounts of really resilience, advocacy, and everyday challenges, from diagnosis to management, and the emotional toll that asthma can take. We'll explore how connection and support can truly make a difference. Moderated by Josh Rheaume, this conversation features 3 inspiring voices from the asthma community. By way of introduction, my name is Jeff Beach, and I'm the President and CEO of Asthma Canada. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. We will be editing it a little bit, and we'll be releasing it on our YouTube channel and our website, and we'll email copies of it out as well. So please share it in whatever ways you want to, through social media and so forth, with anyone that you think might be interested in the coming days. All attendees are muted during the session, but we invite you to type in questions into the Zoom Q&A feature. We'll cover as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. Please note that this webinar is being presented for informational purposes and is not intended to provide any specific medical or otherwise advice. We won't be able to address general asthma questions today, but we do invite you to reach out anytime to the Asthma and Allergy Helpline, which I'll talk about in more detail towards the end of our session today. With that, let's get started. I'd like to acknowledge first the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, we take this moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we all call home. We recognize that those joining us are doing so from across various lands and territories. Asthma is a common but serious disease that affects more than 4.6 million people across Canada, and about 5 to 10% of those are diagnosed with severe asthma. It affects children and adults of all ages. Asthma Canada is committed to improving the lives of the Canadian asthma community through our 3 mission pillars of education, advocacy, and research. We invite you to visit our website, asthma.ca, for more information. At this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce the moderator for this evening's podcast, Josh Rheaume. Many of you probably already know Josh or follow him on social media as the Asthma Runner or his Behind the Wheeze podcast, but Josh brings both experience and insight to the conversation. We're going to start with Josh's video that we released earlier in this month, Asthma Awareness Month, and then we'll turn the floor over to Josh as the host for the webinar today.
My name's Josh, and I'm living with severe asthma. I was diagnosed with severe asthma as a child, and I spent an average of 3 to 4 months in the hospital per year. Life for me was not like life for every other kid. Having asthma defined me. It meant that I was that kid at school that if I was there, I was walking around with an inhaler in my hands at all times. It limited me in everything that I did, and it was very taxing on my family as well. I couldn't enjoy friends the way other people could. Going to other houses for sleepovers wasn't really something that I could do because, well, what if I got sick? What if my chest tightened up? What if I needed my inhaler? What if it turned into something bad? Or what if I exposed myself to triggers that I yet didn't know? The first step to gain control of my asthma really was ensuring that I knew what my triggers were and understanding how they affected my body. The second step, and probably the biggest and most important, is making sure that I was on the proper stack of medications that would lead to controlled lungs, not just what I thought was controlled at the time. Once I had figured out what my triggers were, and once I had known that I was on the proper stack of medications for me, I was able to test myself a little bit and help my lungs a little bit. I went out for a run one day, 100 meters, and I took my inhaler. I came back the next day. I made it 200 meters, then 500 meters, then a kilometer, 2 kilometers, and eventually I ran a marathon all without taking my inhaler. And that cardiovascular activity for my lungs really changed my life. It really made me so much healthier because now I could go out and I could do things with my kids without really needing to lean on my inhaler because my body's used to it. I get to go for walks with them, I get to take them to the park, and I don't really have to worry. It's easy to become complacent with your own lungs, to think that you have control of your asthma when really you don't. It's important to make sure that you're taking those steps you need to have control, because if you're taking your emergency inhaler throughout the day, you don't have control. I have used Asthma Canada support services quite regularly. So they do have the Asthma and Allergy Helpline, which you can contact today, and you can get in touch with a CRE, which is a certified respiratory educator, and they will answer any questions that you might have. If I could share one message with others living with asthma, it's that asthma doesn't need to define you. Asthma is just another challenge for you to overcome. And once you overcome it, really the sky is your limit. Thank you, everyone, for watching that. My name is Josh Rheaume. Thank you, Jeff, for the kind introduction as well. And thanks, everyone, for being here today. It's always a little surreal to me looking back at those moments of my childhood, because for me, growing up with asthma wasn't really just any condition, right? It shaped how I lived, what I could do. It shaped how I saw myself. I was the kid with the inhaler in gym class. I was the one sitting out from birthday parties, getting to know hospital staff more than I was getting to know friends and family, unfortunately. And for a long time, no one really talked about what it meant to grow up with asthma. It was just something that you kind of had to do. But over the years, I've learned that asthma is more than just numbers on a chart or medications on a shelf. It's really about reclaiming your life, your confidence, and your voice. And today, it's such a privilege to be able to use mine to bridge gaps where I can and help where I can in the asthma advocacy space. So again, thank you for having me here today. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Josh Rheaume. I'm an asthma advocate. I'm a marathon runner, which still feels weird to say. And I host a podcast called Beyond the Wheeze, where I get to have conversations like this with others navigating life with respiratory conditions, as well as healthcare providers in the asthma space. It's a real pleasure to be hosting today's webinar with Asthma Canada. This organization has played a huge role in my own advocacy. I certainly wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them, and I'm really grateful to be part of this conversation. And I'm looking forward to everything that we're going to be covering today. With all that being said, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. So Jaqueline Murdoch, diagnosed with asthma later in life, originally from Stratford, Ontario, retired from IT project management. She has dedicated her post-retirement years to researching and leading presentations on health and exercise topics. Vibhas Bapat, born in India, Vibhas lives with both asthma and eczema. He is a technology marketing consultant and currently serves as the chair of Asthma Canada's board, while also caring for his 2 children who also live with asthma. Adrienne Lam lives with asthma and severe allergies. She is an MPH epidemiology student at the University of Toronto and has been a dedicated asthma advocate since interning with Asthma Canada last year. Again, thank you all for being here and for everything that you do for the asthma community. To our panelists as well, I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories and perspectives. So with that being said, let's dive into our first question. Jaqueline, I'll start with you. Can you share your experience of being diagnosed with asthma, and what do you remember about those early days? Jaqueline, you're on mute.
First rule, unmute. Sorry. If I go back to my origins in Stratford, Ontario, which was a very rural area, there were a lot of allergens around us and so forth. And my parents were both smokers. My father was a chain smoker. And under the circumstances, it's not surprising that asthma developed over time. Why I was the only one of 5 children getting asthma, I don't know. But my doctor diagnosed me about a dozen years ago, and it was after chronic coughing and taking tests with this spirometer and getting the feeling for, yes, I'm actually low in terms of my breathing capability for my age, which I thought was rather sad.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's always powerful to hear what those early experiences look like for each of us. Vibhas, I'd love to hear your story as well. Can you share your experience of being diagnosed with asthma?
Thank you, Josh, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my story. I'm old enough that I don't remember being diagnosed. I do remember my father sitting me down. My father was a doctor, and I remember asking him, "Baba, Baba means dad. Baba, why am I wheezing so much? Why am I short of breath?" He told me, "You have something called asthma." I must have been what, 5 years old, and he said, I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, the tubes that go from your nose and your mouth and into your lungs, they swell up and they cause congestion or they cause difficulty, and that's why you're." And that's the first memory I have of anyone ever telling me that I had asthma.
Thanks, Vibhas. I appreciate you sharing that. Those early conversations can really make a lasting impression. It's funny, I'm 34 years old, and I don't remember being diagnosed with asthma. I was diagnosed as a young baby. Sometimes it happens too soon, but there's always a story there. Adrienne, how about you? What do you remember about your diagnosis, and how did it shape your experience?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on here today, Josh. And I definitely really empathize with that experience. And I've gone through like similar experience as well, in that I was diagnosed when I was a baby. So I was actually diagnosed around like 1 years old. So I don't remember too much about it, but from what I've heard from like my mom, I did have a cold this time, and I was wheezing really loudly, and my mom, having heard something like that, she got really worried. So she took me to a family doctor. And from there, I was diagnosed, I was given medications, and I was warned that if this got worse, you were to take her to the hospital. And it did get worse that time and many times after that. And I would often stay at the hospital for like a week or so. So I think that like being admitted and that pattern happened a lot. And it wasn't actually until, later on, when my mom was driving in the car one day and she heard a specialist, a respirologist on the radio say that many people don't actually know how to use inhalers properly. And that's actually where my mom learned how to properly use inhalers. And so this is why, webinars like this and I think are so important, because, you never know who's listening. And I think that's also why education is really important. So yeah, it's a bit of how that was my experience being diagnosed. And I guess just like that started our education journey.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it, Adrienne. And I have heard your story before. You were on the podcast Beyond the Wheeze, one of the episodes. It was so great to have you. And you'd be surprised how many times I hear about individuals with asthma that didn't learn until later in life how to take their inhaler properly. Now, I learned to take my inhaler properly in college after having severe asthma my entire life from YouTube. That's an issue. So let's move on now to something a little more current. How do you manage your conditions now in daily life? Let's start with Jaqueline.
Well, I'm always taking my medications, realizing that asthma is not going to go away. Most important thing for me is to be vigilant about it daily at certain times to make sure I've also got my emergency puffer handy in case I need it. And my husband always reminds me, well, where is it? Just to make sure, especially if we're going on vacation or out of the house and this sort of thing. So it's nice to have a reminder occasionally with it. I also make sure that I take all my vaccinations along the way, because I realize since I'm susceptible to respiratory diseases just because of the asthma, which is very much of concern to me. And as by the way, I had pneumonia when I came back from Malaysia in February, and realizing that that could have been related to the fact that that I am susceptible, even though I've had the vaccinations. But nonetheless, the vaccinations at least lower the probability of my getting it, also the probability of getting severe circumstances associated with it. So it's just being mindful of all these things.
Yeah, you really have to stay proactive with it. Thank you for that answer. And I think important to note as well, vaccines are there. They save lives. They're important. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation these days around them. So let's move on now to Vibhas. If you can answer the same question, how do you manage your asthma day to day?
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Definitely, that was a great point, Jacqueline, that, all my vaccinations are up to date. I take getting vaccinated very seriously. Uh, I'm very fortunate now in that my asthma is stable, but I've been through periods where the unpredictability of asthma attacks took me by surprise. Even when I thought I was well managed, I would have flare-ups, and it was terrifying experiences of shortness of breath, chest tightness, wheezing. And then I'm of an age where am I, having a heart attack or what's happening to me? Fortunately, though, I'm very well managed. Not everyone is as fortunate as I am with my little friend. And this is a oral corticosteroid that I take daily called Symbicort, and it keeps me on the straight and narrow, and I'm very thankful for it. And without it, I would not be able to function day to day.
Absolutely. Love that. And important to note as well, just because your asthma feels good one day doesn't mean you should skip out on your daily dose of corticosteroid or whatever you're taking. It's important to do that. And I had Dr. Kaplan on recently who agrees with that and says, it is human nature that when we feel better, we typically stray away from things we don't feel like we need. So now let's move on to Adrienne. If you can answer the same question, what does asthma management look like for you in your daily routine?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the other two panelists and that I also take my yearly vaccinations. I think that has really helped a lot. And I'm also lucky in that asthma doesn't affect me like daily the way that it used to when I was a kid. So I don't take controller medication anymore. But I still carry my puffer with me everywhere. So like the Ventolin, the blue one. And when I like work out, when I run, I try not to push myself too hard because I know that I would have to use my inhaler. But with like big events, like say like the waterfront marathon, I would have to use that. I would use it before I run, just as a preventative measure. So I think a lot of the management in my daily life is more just about awareness. So just knowing my limits and checking in with how I'm feeling. And like you said, Josh, like I think even if your asthma is mild at this point, don't get too comfortable. Always keep your meds on hand, understand your triggers. But yeah, I still am able to, do exercise, work out. It's just about managing it.
I love that. Education is incredibly important. Knowing what your triggers are so you can stay away from them and live a healthier life is incredibly important. Thanks, Adrienne, for that. And we'll move on to the next question now. And this is a topic I think a lot of people with asthma can relate to. Have you ever felt misunderstood or isolated because of your asthma? Let's start again with Jacqueline.
Well, we're just getting through the tail end of COVID, but no one should be complacent, implying that it's gone away. I think I learned a lot with regard to people's attitudes through COVID period, which has carried on from the point of view of recognizing that, especially with someone who is compromised with regard to the respiratory system, I'm very conscious of going into rooms in buildings where the ventilation may not be the best, in large groups and so forth, without checking to see whether or not it's worth my while to do that first off, and also to make sure that everybody there has either taken their vaccinations, which we can't check anymore, and that's beyond the point, but recognize that people don't come in with symptoms and so forth. So I get a lot of pushback from people because they think, well, what's the big deal? I mean, it's just an event. It's a family. It's a grouping. It's a whatever. But any one of these conditions could end up with a respiratory illness, which I know I got in February last year, where I just took my mask off for a minute to take a video at this charity event and to take pictures and things, and then I ended up with a very severe illness, which was either flu or RSV or whatever. We really couldn't figure out. But nonetheless, it doesn't take much to be in that situation. But on top of that, because I'm doing a lot of presentations on a monthly basis on different health conditions, whether it's bone health or whether it's urban polling and things of that nature, what I try to do is make sure if that inside environment is not up to par with regard to ventilation, I put on my mask. And there was one case where the supervisor who had organized, the coordinator of this event, and she looked at me with the mask on because no one else had masks on. She said, "You're not going to wear that, are you?" So I was a little put off, but I wasn't going to take it off just for her sake, because to me, it was very important for my health. So she put up with me and I did the presentation, and everybody was appreciative of what I did. And I don't think we'll be going back there too often. It's unfortunate.
Thanks for sharing that. Those situations can be tough.
Yeah.
I feel like those conversations, unfortunately, those large gatherings, the conversations around them and being safe too, unfortunately was left behind in the early days of COVID. Vibhas, I'd like to hear your experience as well. Have you ever felt isolated or misunderstood because of your asthma?
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I think almost anyone with this kind of chronic disease has probably felt that to some degree in some situation. I certainly have. I could probably take up the rest of the webinar with stories of being misunderstood, but I have one example that a gym teacher maybe should have known better, but he didn't know better, and it is what it is. Swore to me that I would grow out of it. Said, you know what, just keep exercising. You're gonna grow out of it. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. And of course, you're a kid, and you wanna believe what you're told, and especially when your teachers tell you something. And that was such a huge disappointment to me. That I have never ever grown out of it, and you can't grow out of it. But I was under that impression for at least a couple of years, thinking that yeah, one day it's going to be all over, and I'm going to be fine.
Unfortunately, it's not that easy. And, growing up, my brother told me it was all in my head. Adrienne, I'd like to move on to you now. Have you had moments where you felt misunderstood or maybe hesitant because of your asthma?
Yeah, I've connected with, others who have asthma, and the more I connect with people, the more I realize how common like these kind of feelings are. So I also have this, I remember this one moment, this was from last October. That was right before I ran like the waterfront half marathon. And I remember I had to take a few like puffs before I ran, but I like it wasn't even a crowded place, and I just immediately like stepped away behind this building. It was in private, and I just used my puffer there, and I came back. And like I think it was just more of like the feeling that like I just wanted to hide it, and I kind of felt like, oh, I'm like cheating or getting some unfair advantage, or I'm not like as fit as others here, or it's some sort of like this almost like invisible like disability. And it obviously like those feel like I shouldn't be feeling that way. No one with asthma should be feeling that way, because we actually need the puffer. We're not cheating or anything. But I think that, the more, like I said, the more I talk about it and the more I talk about others and they share their experiences, I think it becomes more normal, and you feel like less different. So I think that, you shouldn't feel ashamed about it. And I think I'm no longer like that. And I don't like think like I don't feel as ashamed. But yeah, that was just a more recent experience. But I think the work we're doing right now and sharing experiences really helps with normalizing it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adrienne. It's something I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, and always important to note as well, when you need to take your inhaler, never really a good thing to go away in hiding when you need to take it, because you are in medical distress at that point. For our next question, I'd love to hear about where you found support along the way in your asthma journeys, whether it's family, friends, healthcare teams, or organizations like Asthma Canada, or wherever you found those anchors. Jaqueline, let's start things off with you again.
Well, it's interesting thought about support, because in a family of five of us, and my parents have since left us, but we share a lot of information and we're very supportive of each other. I was talking to my youngest sister, who lives in Malaysia and Borneo, and asked her, has she ever had a situation where she had any problems with her breathing, because she does a lot of climbing in mountains and so forth. And she indicated that she had been tested when she was on a job in Vancouver at the time. And she was told she had small lungs, which seemed a strange thing to me, but the indications were that the physician who examined her said that it's likely that you came from a home where people were smoking. So that's of interest to know, because we all thought that our lungs would have been affected by the early experience of the 18 years we spent at home in constant smoke in the house. So it's good that we have support within our family and whatever. And certainly my husband's extremely supportive and is always there just if I need anything, which has been great. And our son, when he's not in Beijing, he's certainly been very helpful whenever I've had a need for it. So, and family have been very good too, and friends as well, who understand these basics. And no, I don't think I've ever really felt not supported. But also, I do like the idea of having that helpline for Asthma Canada. That is quite truly amazing. And the fact that I'm using a particular application through my physician's clinic, which is called EAMS, is an electronic asthma management system. And within there's all kinds of information which are direct links to Asthma Canada, which is very helpful from an educational point of view, because I think the more we learn about the situation, the better we can tell others what we're experiencing, but also to be able to better manage ourselves and be able to treat it as part of our life, as Vibhas says, but not the center of our life.
Thanks for that, Jaqueline. Vibhas, over to you. Where have you found support along your asthma journey? Oh, you have your mute on there.
It was certainly Asthma Canada is a great resource, a fantastic resource. But growing up, I grew up in an analog world. I grew up in a world without internet, and I was basically in an information desert. Luckily, my father was a physician, and he would explain as much as he could. I had a very supportive mother, and believe it or not, I would read medical journals. I couldn't understand 75% of what was in there, but anytime there was an article on asthma, I would read it. But it was really if you're growing up without the internet in a pre-digital world in a small town in Canada, it was very difficult to get information. But I did have a respirologist that I went to for 2 years, and he was very helpful. And people say that social media is bad, and it is in many ways, but it's also very good. And so is the internet. And you have a wealth of information available to you now that I didn't have when I was growing up. And I'm thankful for that.
You and I both, Vibhas, I appreciate that answer. And social media is a platform that I use to connect to asthma patients as well and share my experiences, which I think is important, and it's a great sense of community. Adrienne, let's move on to you. Same question. Where have you found support on your asthma journey?
So when I was a kid, I was really lucky enough to have strong support from my family, especially my mom. She was the one who really noticed when something was off, and when I was a baby, and really pushed for that diagnosis. And she's always been on top of my care, but she was always like also trying to figure things out on her own. And I also like grew up. Well, at the time when I was a baby, there like Google wasn't a huge thing. No one really had like phones with them, with like, data, and like there was no like chat GPT or anything. So like information was really inaccessible. But growing up and now, I would say like with Google and everything, I feel like it's so much more easy to access like anything. I don't have to rely on like my mom as much as before, and that, if I want to access information, I can also find it on my own. And I remember like last summer when I actually worked with Asthma Canada, like on the first day on my desk, there were all these like booklets about like diagnosis, triggers, like treatments. I remember like flipping through all of them, and I actually like learned a lot about asthma. And I was like 22 last summer, and it's just crazy how that was the first time I learned like so many things, and I had this condition my whole life, right? So I just think that, you know, if we had access to more like support or education when I was younger, it would have made like a huge difference. Like it's one thing to get a diagnosis, but having the right tools and information helps you feel more empowered to actually manage your asthma with more confidence.
Absolutely. And I'll take this opportunity again to plug the asthma allergy helpline that Asthma Canada offers. Thanks everyone for sharing your stories and insights. It's clear really that asthma impacts each of us in our own ways. And managing it takes patience, it takes knowledge, it takes support, it takes education. What really stands out is how important community is. Knowing we're not alone in this journey can really make a huge difference. And sharing those experiences like these helps us connect and learn from each other. With all that being said, I'm going to pass things now back to Jeff.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you to Adrienne and Jaqueline for joining us this evening. Please don't go anywhere. If you're joining us live or if you're watching the video, we are going to have a Q&A session. I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk a bit about Asthma Canada. I know it's been mentioned a few times now, but one of the main features we offer is an asthma and allergy helpline, which is offered in both English and in French. This service will connect you with a certified respiratory educator at no cost. We are a registered charity and we do not charge for any of the services or the information that we provide. This will allow you to get more personalized support to help you better manage and understand your asthma. And this is also open not just for people who are asthma patients who have been diagnosed, but also to caregivers. So if you have a child with asthma, if you're caring for someone in your home that lives with asthma, this service is available to you. The certified respiratory educators that are part of our team, you can see their pictures here. We have 6 of them. They're an amazing team of well-educated, well-experienced individuals who are here to help. So I encourage you to please reach out to them at any time. You can do that through our website or by calling the number that you'll see on the next slide, which is 866-787-4050. You'll just have to leave a message if you call, and then one of the certified respiratory educators will get back to you. And again, they're available in both English and in French. So please do not hesitate to call us at any time. Just want to mention as well quickly a little bit about Asthma Canada, the fact that we are a registered charity. If you do find this information useful, or if you'd like to support us as we raise funds to help support asthma research and advocacy programs and other education endeavors like this one, please consider making a donation. We appreciate any and all donations. And the QR code on your screen will take you right to our donation page where you can do that. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Josh, and we have some questions that participants have submitted for the panel, for the panelists this evening.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for the presentation. Before we wrap up today, as Jeff said, we're going to jump into a Q&A with our panelists. We've gathered some questions ahead of time. We also took some from the chat. These questions are for our panelists, as I mentioned before. So feel free to open it up to the floor when I ask these questions. So we'll start with the first one. For our older panel members, what changes have you noticed in recent years in how people perceive asthma?
I'll just comment on that. Thanks, Josh. It's been huge, actually, and largely positive. I think because of organizations like Asthma Canada, because of community members like Adrienne and Jaqueline, who are so eloquent in speaking about their experience, the changes in terms of awareness, in terms of understanding, in terms of knowing what we face on a day-to-day basis has improved greatly. We're still a long way from I think where we want to be in terms of really having that grassroots understanding of really any chronic disease, but we're talking about asthma today. But I think it's overall been very positive since I was a young person to now.
Thanks, Vibhas. Would anybody else like to add to that?
Well, I'm probably the oldest here. So I'd like to comment just from the point of view of, yes, I agree with Vibhas that things have changed a lot over time with so many different diseases, and asthma's definitely one of those where the more information is available to us. The problem is there's still a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there which we talk about chat GPT and so on and so forth. I did an AI course last Friday, so that's kind of stuck in my brain too, to figure out how do we separate these things out. And there's so many people with wrong information, so, and we have to combat that and try to gently explain how things should be. So from that perspective, we're fighting a battle with regard to what's correct and what isn't, what is true science, and so on and so forth.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Thanks, Vibhas. We'll move on to the next question. I'm living with someone who has asthma but doesn't take it seriously. They're always using the reliever inhaler. What advice would you give me on how to help them see the importance of proper management? Does anybody want to weigh in?
I would say like there are many tips that I would give, but I would say, just like start with empathy and not, like calling them out on it. Um, I know that my dad also used to have like some breathing problems, like when he'd like go up a flight of stairs, he'd be like breathing really hardly. And so a lot of the times, like they would, maybe they're like not, they might be a bit ashamed of it, or they might not think it's that serious. But I think just, bringing it up lightly and just, I would say, try and appeal to their lifestyle or goals if you're afraid that you're not able to get to them. So for example, if it's affecting their sleep or energy levels, like you could say, like, I've noticed, you're tired a lot. I read that like whatever symptoms or breathing issues can affect your sleep, and you might actually feel better if you have your asthma under control, and you might be able to get better sleep. Or if they like doing exercise, like say they like running or biking, and they're always like taking breaks, you can see that they're having difficulties. You can say, like, you can get help by like going to this website, or, there are actually like treatments out there, you don't have to like suffer as much. So just trying to appeal to them and and keeping their independence and control in mind, without like blaming or shaming them, would help to get your point across.
Yeah, and just adding to that, what Adrienne said, I think this person, it's really important to, if you're taking your reliever medication all the time, your asthma may not be under control. And this person should hopefully understand that asthma is chronic in nature and it requires constant management. It's a lifelong condition. This requires a lot of maintenance, and that includes taking medication, often daily when you're feeling well, identifying and avoiding triggers. There's a whole bunch of things that go into managing asthma, and you have to start by taking it seriously.
If I could interject too, when I approach somebody, I try not to use the "you" word so much as saying, well, when I have these kind of feelings, this is what I do. And in other words, trying to put it from my perspective and how it affects me, and hopefully they'll understand. And then you say, well, how do you feel about when you feel this way? So that they feel a camaraderie, that it's not about you necessarily, it's about us together as a team with respect to the whole issue. The other thing is that I found with my asthma, if I learn how to deep breathe on a daily basis and work on my posture so that my breathing is optimum with regard to top and bottom and the diaphragm and all the breathing muscles, understanding that aspect of it, sometimes you can quiet down the system without having to necessarily take a medication. So the first line of support might be, okay, let's see if we can just slow down our breathing a little bit to 6 to 12 breaths per minute sort of thing, slowly, and back from there, and then see if that helps at all with respect to it. Just some thoughts.
That's absolutely great advice. I believe it's called diaphragmatic breathing, which is something that I try to use in running as well, and breathing through the nose. So there are various breathing techniques out there. Thanks for that, Jacqueline. Move on to the next question. How has asthma affected your personal life, work, school, or hobbies? Again, open to the floor.
In pretty much every way imaginable, Josh. Thank you for that question. Thank the listener for that question. Uh, you know, sleep disruption is one. Asthma symptoms, particularly coughing, wheezing, you often used to get worse at night. I would lose sleep. That and sleep deprivation in itself negatively impacts health. Some people, luckily, we didn't have so much of a problem with this, but financial strain, the cost of medications, doctor's visits, and these type of things for certain people can be a real concern. And of course, the chronic nature of the disease requiring constant management.
Yeah, I just want to jump off of that. It is a chronic illness, and you have to, always keep be on the lookout and be prepared. So, whenever I'm out, I always have to carry with me like a purse, like not even like I can't even carry like a small one. It has to be a really big one because not only do I have to bring my water bottle and my lip balm, and like, the usual things, but also my inhaler and my EpiPen because I have nut allergies. So it's a a bit of a hassle and it's annoying, but they're life-saving things, so you have to bring it with you. But I would say besides that, like I said, asthma doesn't affect me as much as it did when I was younger, but it's still like you have to always be cautious and on the lookout when you're feeling not so well, and it's a bit like tiring, always like thinking about it, and like like when there's cold air, or when someone's like smoking. Like no one in my family at home luckily smokes, so I don't have to like deal with secondhand smoking. But when you're out, or you're in places and the weather is really hot or whatever, like I just have to be more prepared and aware of that. So yeah, and this isn't really what everyone has to go through if you don't have asthma. So it does affect you in the day to day.
Yeah, well, it certainly affects me in that regard, and I appreciate
It's a chronic
Adriana.
illness, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, carrying the EpiPen and carrying the puffers and so forth, which are all really important because I do the same thing. I've got an allergy for wasps and a few odd foods which could give anaphylaxis. So you don't want to take chances. Just carry the pen, as my doctor says to me. But yeah, I mean, there from a hobby perspective and all the different socials we used to go to and all the concerts and all the activities that I would have really enjoyed going to. I think twice about whether or not it's worth the risk associated with it, not knowing what the ventilation is going to be like in the area, how many people are going to show up, and whether or not there's going to be somebody there who's got an illness which could be transmitted. I mean, we take chances going on airplanes. We could take chances, which I did recently, going on a long trip and so forth, and in restaurants and airports, because you can't have your mask on all the time. But a lot of times I've had to turn down things because of it, and that makes me sad.
It certainly does take a second layer of planning for us asthmatics when we're going out or doing anything or planning a trip. It affects a lot. So thank you so much for opening up on that. We'll move on to the next question, and this one involves mental health. Has living with asthma impacted your mental health, like anxiety or stress? One of the floor if anybody wants to take it.
Sure. When I was younger, I think the fear of getting an attack and the limitations it imposed on me when the asthma was severe took a significant toll, I think, on my mental health. And when I look back on it, lots of people experience. I've heard this from other people suffering with asthma. They experience anxiety, depression, stress related to their condition, and some of those effects can be just as debilitating as actually having an asthma attack.
Mhm.
And as you grow old with the disease, it does get better from a mental perspective. But when you're young and you're an adolescent and you're in high school and yeah, I have too many angst-ridden stories that I could tell, but it is difficult. It is challenging for any young person with this, and I just hope and that the understanding is better out there for people who suffer with this.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. When you're younger, like when you're in school, especially, like it's not good to be different. And when you're the one, always carrying like a puffer to gym class, or you're going on a field trip and, the teacher is, like going through the class list and just making sure that everyone who has allergies or health conditions is bringing their like meds and everything. Like it just makes the whole class more aware, and you're more aware of it. And obviously like when you're a kid, you don't want to like stick out or stand out too much, and it's not, and you might feel a bit ashamed because it's not something you're particularly like, super proud about to, have a condition like asthma. So um yeah, I think that was my experience a lot as a kid. Just feeling different and just feeling a bit of ashamed of the health conditions that I had. But obviously now I'm like no longer feeling like that, which I think like, was a big moment of growth for me. But yeah, I think it can be hard for some kids, especially.
Absolutely, totally agree. And once you learn that for yourself, you can then advocate for others, which you are doing. So thank you, Adrienne. We'll move on to a question now from the chat. Jen asks, do any of the panelists get the pneumonia shot? And is this something important to do? And how do they find it?
I can take that one, at least to begin with. I've had the COVID and the flu shot and the RSV and the pneumonia shot and the shingles shot. I've had all of the different ones to the point where I'm totally up to date with boosters, et cetera, et cetera. The pneumonia shot, I think, was very important to me because of the asthma condition, for one thing, but also recognizing in the family dynamic that I had. There was like my older sister, who's just 2 years older. She had pneumonia beginning of COVID, and I thought, well, I had to put upon my doctor. I said, I think I need another one because it's been updated since. So I got it back in 2023, a couple of years ago, with the idea. I said, well, look, my sister had it. He says, oh, okay. The problem with some of the pneumonia shots, unfortunately, they are not free with OHIP. And I think that's a real mistake. And the same thing applies to RSV, where they're charging. And I think shingles may be available for some people, but not for others. And it's a real deterrent. I know I have a friend in the neighborhood who's not getting his RSV shot because he says, well, I can't afford that. And that should never be in Canada. I just don't understand that. This whole issue of pharmacology and medications available to everyone who need it should be the case. And I'd be advocating for that for everybody.
And that is one of the things that Asthma Canada advocates strongly for as well, Jacqueline, but it's a good point that you brought up.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for sharing, for answering that question. And thank you, Jen, for submitting that question. I'll move on to the next question now. What's one thing that you wish more people understood about asthma?
I'll take that first, and I'll just say that the one thing that I wish people would understand is that it is a chronic disease. It is basically with you for life. It waxes and wanes. I went through long periods where I was exercising, I was lifting weights, I played hockey, I played soccer, and then there are down phases where you really struggle with the disease, but it never goes away. It's chronic, and that's the one thing that I think would probably be most impactful in terms of having people understand what the four of us go through.
Yeah, a lot of it also is invisible stuff. Like you don't, see the fear when, someone feels like their chest tightening or they can't breathe. And what, like if things like wildfires, maybe avoiding like going outside more than other people. Um, I also think it's, you know, a lot of people like misunderstand. They think, oh, it's just like a little bit of wheezing or whatever, but and they brush it off. But I think it can be really serious. And I think, you know, the general public, like teachers, the community healthcare providers, like everyone plays a role, and like, and I think if everyone understands it and takes it seriously, which means like, you know, listening, supporting, and helping create like supportive environments, I think it would also help with making others like with asthma feel more, you know, safe and confident in these environments. And not feel that, you know, it's not a serious condition, but to be actually taken seriously.
Great
Yeah,
answer. Thank you, Adrienne. Oh, Jacqueline, go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm thinking that there's a real opportunity here. And of course, Vibhas says you're probably more involved in this in understanding what's going on with regard to the asthma world and what we're doing. But what I'd like to see more of is, whether it's social media or television or radio or whatever, adverts and descriptions or little anecdotes or things like that, so people understand better and see themselves in those circumstances and realize that maybe they understand better a family member, a friend, a neighbor, whatever, or even themselves, to recognize, oh, I have those conditions too. Maybe I should get checked with it, or so and so and so forth. Because if the knowledge doesn't get out there, people could go, as we know, for years and years not being recognized and their life is compromised because of it. And that's a shame.
Yeah, no, for sure, Jacqueline. I just also want a quick shout out to all of the folks in Manitoba who are suffering now, right now with the wildfires. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
asthma in those communities. So our certainly my thoughts are all our thoughts are with them and the entire community, not just those with asthma. I hope this is over sooner than later.
Thank you for the insights. We'll move on to the final question now. If you could change one thing about how asthma is treated or understood in society, what would it be? Does anybody want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I think if we make it more, the information is more available to teachers and to students and so forth, that they understand that this is just part of people's lives, just like anything, really. It may not be a visible disability of a sort, and I don't know whether disability is the proper word there, so forgive me if I'm using it incorrectly. But the fact is that if it's routine and you understand and you expect certain things of people, and you should be able to just say, well, I've got asthma, and they say, oh, really? You know, tell me more about it, as opposed to, oh, you know, like there's something wrong about that, or it's unusual, because it's really not that unusual. People need to treat it as a day-to-day thing, that they'll be meeting up with people that have asthma. And maybe we should be more advocating out to say, by the way, I've got asthma, just in case people want to start a conversation.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead, Adrienne.
Yeah, I was gonna say if there was one thing I would like change and or you know say about asthma, it'd be like to move away from treating it and reacting to more like preventative measures and you know more like a health equity lens in terms of like looking at asthma. So you know instead of like you know avoiding like different things or managing it through you know with like inhalers. But if we like tackle like the root causes, like, you know, access to care, housing quality, air pollution, you know, maybe like fewer people would like suffer as much if they're like mold-free homes or affordable like medications covered, including biologics and culturally like safe care. I think, you know, kids wouldn't have to like miss school or people wouldn't have to it wouldn't compromise your like sports or other activities. So I think it's like just being able to tackle all these like bigger, broader issues, I think would also lead to better asthma care down the line.
Yeah, and one thing that if I could change would be that you know, a national realization that this is not an uncommon disease. There are 4 million plus Canadians with asthma. That's you know well more than 10% of the population. we are there are a lot of us, and we need to acknowledge that fact and move forward with funding and research and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, I was actually at one of Asthma Canada's events a couple weeks ago, and it's just crazy how asthma is not like funded as, compared to like other chronic diseases, and it is the most most common chronic disease in children, I believe, and it's just, it's just not understood that much. Like people don't really have a good idea about it, but they might have a good idea about diabetes or other common conditions, so chronic conditions. So I do think more education, more awareness in the general public, and more like research funding going into it would also be really helpful.
Thank you all for those insights. And just to add my own piece to that, education is key, not just for the patients or even the providers or even other members of the community. I had a discussion with someone today and I talked to them about Rudro's story. So Rudro Prince was an 8-year-old boy who unfortunately lost his life due to a severe asthma attack. And his parents advocate for him and advocate for education because they didn't realize that asthma could be so severe. But we do lose our lives from asthma. 300 Canadians lose their lives per year from asthma. So it needs to be taken seriously. Thank you all for answering that question. That brings us to the end, actually, of the Q&A, and the close for today's session. So I'd like to take a minute just to sincerely thank all of our panelists for being here today, for being so open and honest and generous with your experiences. These conversations do matter. Hear the different ways asthma shows up in people's lives in the community, and learning the ways that you've learned and navigated is extremely powerful and beneficial to listeners. And to everyone who sent in questions, thank you so much for doing that. And lastly, of course, a huge thank you to everyone that tuned in today and Asthma Canada for putting on this webinar. I think it's incredibly important, and thank you for inviting me today to moderate. With that being said, wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. Stay well, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.